Can the carnivore diet prevent sunburn? That's the topic that we're going to cover today. So let's jump right in. So, why did I decide to tackle this particular topic? Well, I happened to be browsing through the Facebook posts this morning on one of the carnivore groups, and someone had commented about how they had gone over to a HuffPo article about sunburns and basically made a comment that they no longer get sunburns now that they're carnivore. Or actually, as they stated, now that they had eliminated seed oils. And of course, that maybe didn't turn out well because some wild Karen in there reported his comment as misinformation. It became a big to-do, basically, like back and forth. So, I thought, I've been interested in this topic for some time. And so I just started diving in and actually researching it and said, like, maybe I can find some actual data and provide this, because this person had happened to, who was, providing the negative feedback, was talking about how they were science and fact-based. And I thought, well, okay, well, let's see what science and fact actually has to say about this. But before we get there, let's start off with this article on ketogenicendurance.com, carnivore diet for sunburn. And he says, I have a greater tolerance for sun exposure since going on the carnivore diet. How? Well, I thought this was interesting. Is talking about a couple of people, a husband and his wife who are from England, who notice that they can spend longer in the sun without sunscreen, and that when they do eventually go red, it doesn't hurt. Or even that once they're out of the sun during the night, it doesn't become uncomfortable. After sun, they don't need after sun. And then the redness turns brown and basically becomes a tan. I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. Now, of course, I've also had this experience, and this was the experience that this original commenter on the HuffPo article was having. And I've noted a lot of other people have also stated that they've had this experience. So this person even says this in his blog post. I'm not the only one who notices this sunburn paradox. I first heard about the sunburn paradox from Tucker Goodrich on a couple of podcasts. In fact, if you're interested in looking into the carnivore diet for sunburn, you should probably just stop reading this blog and search for information Tucker Goodrich puts out on this subject. Basically, the gist that he blames is excess omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, basically from consuming vegetable and seed oils. I've been thinking about this, and this is where I've been looking as well. I've been thinking it has to have something to do with the omega-6 fats, how they're highly inflammatory, and how they're very unstable. And I wonder if that's playing into the fact that our skin damage is not able to heal properly when we have too much omega-6 in our diet. There's a little bit of talk about, omega-3 to omega-6 ratios in here. And honestly, if we want to talk about that, then let's go here first and let's talk about that. The historical ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Now, this is a chriskresser.com article, which again, I will link below. And it says throughout 4 to 5 million years of hominid evolution, diets were abundant in omega-3 long-chain fatty acids, right? But they were relatively low in omega-6 seed oils. And this is true. Anthropological research suggests that our hunter-gatherer ancestors consumed omega-6 and omega-3 fats in roughly a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, I've seen anywhere from 4-to-1 to 1-to-1. But the point is that we can have slightly more omega-6. I don't know as high as 1-to-1. I'm not sure about that. But maybe our ancestors who had access to higher quality animals, maybe this was the case, because the animals weren't eating any kind of grain-based diets. They were eating mostly grass. So maybe so. Now, interestingly, they talk about the onset of the Industrial Revolution, how seed oils came about, and then it started talking about, look at the omega-6 content of these various seed oils. 75, 65, 54, 50, 42, soybean 51, walnut 52. Okay, a lot of omega-6. And if you want to see how this compares to, say, animal fats, then I have an interesting graph. So comparison of dietary fats. And I really like this graph here because it breaks down not just the omega-6, but it also shows you the omega-9, the omega-3, and the saturated fat. Now, the omega-3, or the omega-9 rather, is the oleic acid, the omega-9 monounsaturated fat. And then you have, so that's this light color here, right? Now, on the other hand, the purple here represents the saturated fat. Most of the animal meats that we eat, especially if they're ruminant, are going to be basically mostly monounsaturated, and the rest will be saturated. Now, actually, monounsaturated fats are already considered heart healthy by the mainstream medical community. They have a problem with saturated fat just because they're looking at the wrong fat, basically. They're looking at saturated fat if it's bad, when I would say it's really omega-6 and sugar that are the problem. The green or darker green color is the omega-3, and that's also not something we want to focus on here. What we want to focus on is the amount of omega-6 fatty acids that are in these seed oils. So let's just take a look. Again, safflower, 14%. Extra virgin olive oil, not as bad, 9%. But the problem with olive oil is that some of them are doctored. You just can't be sure. I don't know. I just generally avoid olive oil. I don't consume it anymore. Canola oil, 21. This peanut oil is 33%. Lard's only 9%. So basically, in the case of lard, this is fat from a pig, and the pig being a monogastric animal, it's not like a ruminant where it changes. A ruminant animal, the bacteria in the gut will change polyunsaturated fats into monounsaturated and saturated, which is why if you look at beef, it's like 48% monounsaturated, and it's like 45 to 47% saturated, and the remaining 3 to 5% is going to be polyunsaturated fats. It doesn't matter whether it's finished on grain or finished on grass. The difference between those two is like 1.5% difference in polyunsaturated fats. So that's why it's either 3 or up to 5%. Okay, so corn oil, terrible, 57%. Soybean oil, terrible, 54%. Cottonseed oil, terrible at 54%. Sunflower oil, atrocious at 71%. Now, let's back up. What is butter? Butter is only 3% omega-6. Again, ruminant animal, 3%. All right, so let's go back to the articles, all right, and let's look at this carnivore diet for Sunburn a little bit. So he talks about a study where mice were exposed to acute UV radiation, and they were either fed a diet of 20% saturated fat or a diet of 20% polyunsaturated fat. And it says that basically that the mice that were exposed to the diet of saturated fat provided almost complete protection from the suppression of CHS, whereas feeding 20% polyunsaturated fat resulted in 57% suppression. So right there, it shows you that the saturated fat actually helped prevent, in this case, tumors in mice that were exposed to UV radiation, whereas the polyunsaturated fat made them more susceptible to tumors. Interesting. You can read through this and find out more. But I said, okay, well, let me do some more digging in this because, I want to know. And like, here's the study that he's citing on that rat study. It's dependence of photocarcinogenesis and photoimmunosuppression in hairless mice on dietary polyunsaturated fat. So there's the source for that. But as I was researching, I found this article, and I thought this was a very good article. And this is on Oregon State University website, and it's called Essential Fatty Acids and Skin Health. And I thought, wow, this is a good article here. So let's take a look at this. There's a bunch of bullet points here that are really talking about omega-6 and omega-3, and I'm going to lay out a story for you here. So first of all, omega-6 and omega-3 play a critical role in normal skin function and appearance. All of these bullet points are supported by science. Okay, so let's get that out of the way at the beginning. So all of these are based, there's more information that you can click on, and you can go and you read the details, and then you can even go and click there are citations in here. You can go click on the number of the citation, and it will take you to the specific scientific paper that they're referencing. All right. Next, metabolism of essential fatty acids, right, is limited in the skin, right, and therefore considered conditionally essential nutrients for the skin. So basically they're saying, look, essential fatty acids are essential for skin health, right? The skin can't metabolize them, but the skin obviously needs them. More on that in a second. And as a result, we need to pay attention to what we're consuming, and we need to have these for our skin health. This is interesting. Both omega-6 and omega-3 PUFAs give rise to potent signaling molecules called eicosanoids, which influence the inflammatory response in skin. Interesting. But in what way? So then we see that consuming oils rich in both omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids can alter the fatty acid composition and the eicosanoid content of the skin as well. Okay, so now we're seeing that omega-6 and omega-3 can influence the skin, right? They're essential for the skin because the skin can't metabolize or make them, so we have to provide them. They have to come from what we consume, basically. But we're also seeing that when we consume a ratio of N6 and N3, that whatever that ratio is, we're going to find that fatty acid composition in our skin. It actually alters the fatty acid composition of our skin. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Dietary supplementation and topical application of certain omega-3 PUFAs attenuates UV-induced photo damage. This is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about photo damage. UV-induced photo damage is sunburn. And this says that omega-3 can help mitigate that. So if we're consuming more omega-3s, or we're at least consuming less omega-6, then we can end up with more omega-3 in our skin. Remember, omega-6 and omega-3 compete for the same metabolic pathway when they're processed. And so if we have too much omega-6, even if we have omega-3, it basically kind of gets drowned out by the noise of the omega-6 because they're both competing for the same pathway. This is why if we consume too much omega-6 and we get too much omega-6 in our skin, well, then we're not going to have enough omega-3 in our skin, and it may lead to problems. And we know that this omega-3 in the skin attenuates UV-induced photo damage. So what is this study? I thought this study was interesting, so I decided to dive into it. And here's the study. The effects of N6 and N3 polyunsaturated fatty acids on protein metabolism, cell-mediated immunity, and production of cytokines, etc., etc., etc. Now, they used a rat burn model. Okay, so in this experimental study, using a rat burn model, N6 PUFA increased serum interleukin 6 and tumor necrosis factor, and it decreased nitrogen balance. And that blew my mind because I know something about nitrogen balance. So nitrogen balance, what is nitrogen balance? What is positive nitrogen balance? Positive nitrogen balance is something that all bodybuilders want. And that's because it helps to promote growth. It helps to you want to be in a positive nitrogen balance so you can build muscle. You can recover. You'll have better recovery from your workouts, and you'll have you'll be able to do a better job at growing muscles. You'll be, grow them faster or bigger, however you want to call it. Basically, it helps with muscle growth and it helps with workout recovery. So positive nitrogen balance is huge in the bodybuilding world. And I know about this from a little study and from a coach. You may have heard him. His name is Vince Gironda. He was an old school bodybuilding trainer. Trainer to very famous people, Lou Ferrigno, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Frank Zane, others like that. These were huge people in the golden era of bodybuilding, so his name is well known. Where did Vince Gironda find out about this positive nitrogen balance? He read a study, and this study was a burn study. This was about the treatment of burn patients. I said, this is interesting. So let's look at the burn study. So the burn study is, it was a 1975 published in the British Journal of Plastic Surgery, and it is 35 eggs per day in the treatment of severe burns. So this is the actual study here. And Right off the bat, it says, in order to maintain a positive nitrogen balance in extensive burns, the daily calorie requirements may be as much as 7,000. Oral feeding is the pathway of choice. It is, however, often difficult for extensively burned patients to ingest large quantities of meat, fish, and other calorie-rich nutrients. Over the past 2 decades, we have been feeding our severely burned patients between 30 and 40 eggs per day. They appear readily assimilable, easily ingested, and without untoward effects. So what this group of doctors was doing was treating severe burns through the use of, well, animal-based nutrition first, but also essentially through the use of positive nitrogen balance. And the way they were achieving that in the case of burn patients was with a lot of eggs, because they were basically able to blend them up and they could drink the eggs, and it allowed them to get a lot of calories in so that they could treat these burns. Right there, this directly applies in this case, because this is about burns. This is about burns of the skin and about using positive nitrogen balance to help in the treatment of those burns. So positive nitrogen balance, it doesn't just help with growth of muscles and repair of muscles. It helps with repair of the skin as well. So now we see the story coming together, right? What we see is that if we're consuming too much omega-6, then that omega-6 can build up in our skin. And in that case, it can give rise to more inflammation in the skin. But also, if we're consuming a lot of omega-6, it means our omega-3 will be less. And as a result of having less omega-3 in the skin, we can see that the attenuation of UV-induced photo damage is affected. And that is through this rat study here, where one of the reasons why that is because it not only increased interleukin-6, it not only increased tumor necrosis factor, but it also decreased nitrogen balance. And so we can also see from this study that talked about dependence of photocarcinogenesis and photoimmunosuppression in rats, really what it boils down to is that too much omega-6 in our skin from a diet high in seed oils is going to be an issue for us when it comes to our skin wanting to heal, or its ability to heal from exposure to the sun. And this seems to be, in my opinion, why when people go carnivore and they eliminate these seed oils, that they are able to spend longer in the sun without any need for sunscreen or burning. And eventually, if they do go red, they find it doesn't hurt. And once they're, out of the sun, they find it doesn't become uncomfortable. And they find that whatever damage, if there is any damage, or if there is any redness, it quickly heals and turns into a tan. So that is what I think is going on here. It is the omega-6, in my opinion, based on the studies that I've shown here. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. What is your experience with this? Are you able to spend longer in the sun? I know I am personally able to spend much more time in the sun and not burn. I don't know that I could say I'm burn proof, but I definitely can spend more time in the sun. I don't burn as easily as I used to, for sure. What do you think? Did I miss anything? Did I get something wrong? Do you have another study that you know of that you can cite that might be directly applicable? I think this is fascinating, and I think this is proof, in my opinion, that yes, the carnivore diet can indeed help with sun exposure, tolerance to sun, and it can mitigate sunburns. If you like this video, please like and subscribe so that I can create additional content like this. It really will help. And I hope you enjoyed the content, and have a good day.